Miami Hurricanes linebackers coach Derek Nicholson has been putting in the work on the recruiting trail, and the Hurricanes have just been predicted to land one of the top linebackers in the country.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, got a new crystal ball from one of the very important players who visited this past weekend at Miami, a player we did talk about earlier this week on Locked On Canes. We're going to circle back to that conversation, but our pal Gaby Urrutia at Inside the U has dropped a crystal ball at 24/7 Sports with a 7 out of 10 certainty for Miami to land four-star linebacker Gavin Nix out of IMG Academy. Boarding school, one of the top high school programs in the country. Of course, you know, we all remember a couple of years ago landing the likes of Francis Mauigoa and Riley Williams out of that school. Would love to rebuild the IMG pipeline. Gavin Nix, he's the 11th rated linebacker in the nation according to the 24/7 Sports rankings. He's also a top 100 recruit nationally at number 88. Comes in 6 foot tall, 225 pounds. This is a fun player to watch, folks. If you haven't checked out the Gavin Nix huddle reel and the highlights that are available on YouTube, some of you have maybe seen him play in person at IMG Academy. Comes off a really good junior season, was a starter last year at linebacker, 42 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5 quarterback hurries, and a sack, 8 games. That's according to Maps Preps. And I also encourage you guys, and I'm going to try to track down Gavin Nix, hopefully in the near future, to join us here on Locked On Canes. But good friend of the show, Chalupa Batman, has interviewed Gavin and went over his own film with him. And if you haven't checked out that interview with our guy CB talking with Nix, it gives you an idea of what type of young man Gavin Nix is. And obviously, again, let me stress this. This is a crystal ball. This is not a commitment. We'll talk about the other schools that are in play here for Gavin Nix, but I hope Miami is able to land this player because he sounds to me like a natural leader. He speaks like a 30-year-old when it comes to his maturity and his football IQ. He gives me serious Jonathan Vilma vibes, and the real ones will remember what I'm talking about there. Nix is not only a physical freak, but he's a very intelligent player. He's a film junkie. He's got elite closing speed, 6 foot tall, 225 pounds. And yeah, it sounds like Miami really made a move for him coming off of this official visit this past weekend. He referred to it as the favorite visit he's ever been on. Now, just a little bit of context for that, okay? Obviously, a player of Nix's caliber has been on probably several dozen unofficial visits, including to Miami previously. This was his first OV, so he's still got a couple of OVs to take here in this process. So, you know, Miami definitely set the bar. You hope nobody else raises the bar for Nix, but he referred to it as the favorite visit he's ever been on. And for a little bit more context on the Gavin Nix recruitment, again, this is a linebacker Miami would love to land. Derek Nicholson, Miami's linebackers coach, is seemingly building a really good relationship with him. You know, we spoke with the recruiting overlord earlier this week, and here's what Brian Smith had to say here on Locked On Canes about Gavin Nix's Miami recruitment. So Miami also hosted 4-star linebacker Gavin Nix from IMG Academy. He's also going to be visiting Oregon and Florida State later this month. Where do you think Miami stands? I know Derek Nicholson has been recruiting Nix really hard.
I would put Miami either at number 1 or 2. They're right there, and you're right. And Nicholson's, by the way, just for the record, is a really good recruiter. Kids really respect him. Obviously, he's played in the NFL. He played at Florida State. He's a guy that's just respected in general in the business, and his recruiting acumen is showing up too. So I like Miami here. If I had to pick one school, Oregon's always a kind of a weird school to predict with kids visiting out of state. They're fascinated with it. All these kids, the uniforms and all that. So I never discount Oregon, but Miami's closer because he's from the Kissimmee area. So it's not that far for him to go to school, and he plays at IMG. The only other school I think he might visit would be Notre Dame in the fall, and that's iffy. I'm not sure if that will take place, but I think he'll stay in state. I like Miami's chances the most.
You'll love that. And that was, by the way, that was before the crystal ball came in, a couple days before Brian Smith with us saying he likes Miami's chances with Gavin Nix. Now, those other schools that he mentioned, Nix does have 2 more OVs this month. He's going to be at Oregon this weekend, and you always have to watch out for the Ducks. And they've, Dan Lanning, we know, is an excellent recruiter. That's just been an excellent program with recruiting because Mario Cristobal obviously cleaned up before Lanning got there. Lanning is doing a tremendous job, and he's doing a tremendous job within the state of Florida. So you have to watch out for Oregon this weekend. The following weekend, he will be in Florida State. And then as Brian mentioned, he's saving potentially a couple of other official visits for the fall, maybe not to Notre Dame, but we certainly like where Miami stands for this player. So that's the latest there. Now, elsewhere at linebacker, we're going to have to sweat things out with Elijah Melendez, for the next several months heading into National Signing Day, because listen, he's saying all the right things for Miami, and I hope Miami can keep Elijah Melendez, the 4-star committed linebacker, locked in. I hope Miami can, but he is taking an official visit to Oklahoma this weekend, so we're going to have to sweat another one out with Melendez because, if Miami can end up landing both Melendez, who's already committed and hopefully stays committed and signs in December, and if Miami can land Gavin Nix as well, you're talking about a potential great recruiting haul at the linebacker position by Derek Nicholson and company. Now, the Gavin Nix crystal ball is a big one, and it's important prediction, a player Miami would love to land. It's not the only crystal ball Miami has received this week. Early in the week, I think it was Monday afternoon, Miami received a crystal ball to land 3-star defensive lineman Walter Mathis, 6'2", 270 pounds, out of Calvary Baptist Day in Savannah, Georgia. He just visited last weekend as well. The other teams that are really in on his recruitment, I know some people will say we'll see the 3-star tag. It's like, oh, do we need more 3 stars? He's a 3-star player with a 4-star offer list because the other schools that are heavily in the mix for Mathis are LSU, Clemson, and Auburn, among others. So he's got a very impressive offer list. We are starting to get some feedback, by the way, on the Vernell Brown official visit. Hopefully we get more feedback throughout the day on Jaime Ffrench, who may not have wrapped up his visit yet, but Vernell Brown III has wrapped up his visit. So some of the other things we're going to talk about here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes, there is a change of leadership at the very top at the University of Miami because the president is on his way out. We do have an acting university president right now who's very athletics friendly. I don't know if Joe Echeverria is going to get the permanent appointment or not. I'll tell you why he may not, but why I wouldn't mind if he did. So how could a new university president affect things in athletics when it comes to possible conference realignment, the new era of revenue sharing that we're going to be in starting in a couple of years? And we'll talk more about those Jaime Ffrench and Vernell Brown visits. Also, a certain stud running back is going to be on campus next week, finally officially joining the team. So, my friends, we're only getting started. We have so much to talk about right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. I know you're keeping it locked to Game Time. Folks, this is the only ticket service that I use because you are getting the best deals, including the best last-minute ticket deals for sporting events, concerts, shows, musical theater. For my fellow South Floridians out there, we got the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, I don't know if it's going to get to a Game 5, but if it does, you're going to get the best deals for Game 5 and Sunrise on the Game Time app. It really is a game changer. If anyone out there is planning on going to Game 4 of the NBA Finals, Game Time makes getting finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Folks, the flash deals are amazing. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. You can save up to 60% off buying tickets last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, anything you can imagine. I love the all-in pricing. Game Time shows you the total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. Locked On, I love this network. They have launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So feedback is starting to come in from Vernell Brown. Now, Vernell Brown, he and Coach Kevin Beard already went viral this week for the backflip, right? We had that video for you on yesterday's episode of 43-year-old Miami receivers coach Kevin Beard and 4-star wide receiver official visitor Vernell Brown doing the tandem backflip. I love that video, and it just goes to show you KB will go the extra mile to try to relate to these young men, and I love it. He does an excellent job in recruiting. And, you know, Kevin Beard just last year pulled in one of the best wide receiver classes in America, having the trio of Chance Robinson, Josiah Trader, and Nye Carr last year. What's the encore going to be this year? Now, you know, Vernell Brown is someone who we've seen him at times strongly trending to Ohio State. The recruiting overlord told us earlier this week that Florida State is very much in for Brown's recruitment. I wonder if Miami might have made a move to the point where the Hurricanes can get themselves right in that mix to possibly be the favorites. And also having Vernell Brown and Jaime Ffrench visit in tandem. I hadn't really thought about this, but these guys are friends and 7-on-7 teammates, SFE. I was watching a video with Josh Newberg and Izubi Charles on 3, and Izubi, I think it might have even been Josh who brought up the idea that, you know, maybe Miami's trying to recruit these guys as a tandem because they are tight. They know each other very well. And maybe not just Miami. Other universities might also say, hey, we'd love to get you guys in here as maybe a package deal. You enjoy each other's company. You like playing together. Why don't you come play together here? Maybe Miami was using that pitch as well. I don't necessarily think these two players will end up committing to the same place, but it can't hurt the pitch for that possibly being something that Miami is going after. But here's what Vernell Brown said to On 3 Sports this morning after his visit. He says, the visit was monumental, he said. Obviously, this is my second OV, so I don't want to say they're the leader or anything like that, but this was a really good visit, and it really helped Miami, he said. They were just saying how I can take this program to the next level. One thing that they did different from anyone else so far is they showed me a detailed plan they had for me specifically, just showing me the steps that I'll take from my freshman year to my junior year, if it's 3-and-out deal, and for whatever reason, if it took 4 years, that what that would look like, and even some special team stuff. I kind of wish Vernell Brown hadn't put that out in the open, but I have heard these stories before from recruits, and they really like it. Apparently, this is not a very common thing around the country that Miami staff, they get so uber prepared for these visits that, like he said, they show most every player, maybe every player that comes in for an OV, they show you that detailed plan of this is how we expect your trajectory to go, from how we use you, from how you develop, from what you're going to learn here, how much you're going to play here. And I'm not saying promising starting jobs or anything like that, but they show players a detailed 3 to 4 year plan. I've heard these stories before, and apparently it's something that not a lot of other schools do. So I kind of wish Vernell hadn't released the trade secrets, because maybe now the other visits he goes on there say, hey, Vernell, we've got a 3-year plan for you. Don't worry about that Miami plan. We got one for you. But it just goes to show you how uber prepared Miami is, from Shannon Dawson to Kevin Beard on down, that these guys are really ready to show these players what they're going to mean for a program. And by the way, Vernell Brown, he is planning to announce for somebody in July. That's when he plans to announce his verbal commitment. And he got a shout out on social media from Xavier Restrepo, who said on Twitter or X, he said, Miami fans, we need Vernell Brown here. Do your thing. So Hurricanes fans, show Vernell Brown some love on social media, because that would be a big get if Miami can land him. Again, Jaime Ffrench also visiting. I think that official visit is wrapping up today. Haven't heard or seen any quotes yet. Now, we have seen this trend with Jaime Ffrench where it seems like every time he takes a visit, the place he was just at becomes the favorite. So I wonder if Miami might become the favorite, and then we'll see what happens next week when he takes another visit. But I look forward to hearing about that one as well. And yeah, Miami shooting their shot when it comes to their wide receiver board. There's a lot of guys that they really like. Dallas Wilson is another important target. Now, he's an Oregon commit, so Miami would be working for the flip, and Wilson's going to be visiting officially this weekend. And I like a lot of these receivers, but low key, Dallas Wilson might be my favorite in the class. I love his size. It's 6'3", 195. Miami is also very high on Tyler Williams, Joshua Moore, Cortez Mills, among others. Of course, Vernell Brown and Jaime Ffrench, who just visited today. So the Hurricanes are casting a very wide net at wide receiver with a lot of really good 5-star, 4-star, and high-level 3-star prospects out there. And we'll see if Coach KB can work that magic again and land somebody truly special there. By the way, here's some good news in terms of transfers. Damian Martinez, he's going to be here soon. Damian Martinez is going to be on campus probably this weekend. He's going to officially join the team earlier next week. He's officially enrolling. He'll be matriculated at Miami. He's going to start going through team workouts. Now, Martinez, he has been working very hard, even though he's been away from the team so far. The reason why he had to join the team relatively late is just because of the academic calendar out west that, Oregon State, he was finishing up his classes. They do their semesters a little bit different than Miami. A lot of the schools on the East Coast and Southeast have a different structure for their academic calendar than out west. So he wasn't able to join the team until now. So I cannot wait to start to hear the feedback of how Damian Martinez is doing, because these guys are pumped for his arrival. The Oregon State transfer running back who rushed for just under 1,200 yards last season, 9 touchdowns. He's going to make Miami's rushing attack even more dangerous. So according to 24/7, after Martinez officially arrives and starts practicing with teammates, of course, offseason workouts, of course, but workouts with the team early next week, the only guy who isn't here yet and will be here soon is Tyler Barron, who was the last one to transfer in. And I know with Barron, there was also an academic calendar thing, even though he's not from the West Coast, but there was also an academic calendar issue for him why he couldn't join the team until a little bit later. I think he's going to be around right around fall camp from what I heard. So the team will be virtually whole once Damian Martinez arrives. So folks, coming up next, I want to talk about the leadership change at the University of Miami. And yes, I know athletics is not necessarily the number one priority, and it's not the only priority when you're appointing a university president, but I'd love to discuss the possibilities and what new leadership could mean for Canes football, Canes basketball, and so on. And also another shout out from Phil Steele in the College Football Preview magazine on him expecting Miami to be one of the surprise teams in the country this year. We will explain why when we come back. Folks, it's a Friday. You can't ruin a Friday, and we're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. Can't tell you how much I appreciate the everydayers out there for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch each and every day. If you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, I'd encourage you to try out our Locked On Canes Insiders texting service. You can click the link in the show description below. When you become a Locked On Canes Insider, you get text messages directly from my phone to yours with show updates, breaking news, recruiting scoops. When something happens, we talk about it there on the Locked On Canes Insiders. You can get that info before we have a chance to do an episode about it. You could try it free for 14 days. Click that link below. Try Locked On Canes Insiders free. And then after 2 weeks, if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. So I've spent the last 3 days combing through 350 plus pages of Phil Steele's college football magazine. It's like a Bible. It's very long, and I'm only really scratching the surface. We talked earlier this week about him having Miami in his top 10, about Phil Steele having a conference leading 7 Miami Hurricanes as first team All ACC players, more than any other team in the conference. So Phil Steele, he's bullish on Miami, and he has Miami rated as his number 5 surprise team in the country this year. Now, full disclosure, he actually ranks both Florida State and Clemson above Miami as possible surprises for different reasons, even though he thinks Miami could potentially win the conference. But here's what Phil Steele says about Miami as his number 1 surprise team. Miami is known for underachieving, he says, and have not finished in the top 10 since 2003. Cristobal brings in quarterback Cam Ward, running back Damian Martinez, and a slew of top-notch portal players to go along with his solid freshman recruiting classes. While he is just 12 and 13 in his first 2 years in Miami, here Miami is in all 8 of my top unit rankings, he says. They do not face any top 15 teams on the road and face just my number 43 strength of schedule. Cristobal was an assistant at Alabama for 4 years and was in 2 national title games there. At Oregon, he was a dog in both Pac-12 title games, but won both convincingly, so he can be very effective in the postseason. Now, I think, he reminds you of a couple of important things there. We stressed this earlier this week. Strength of schedule is important, right? Miami has a relatively easier schedule than they had a year ago. Number 43 strength of schedule. They were number 16, according to Phil Steele, the year prior. So the schedule is a little bit easier. The team obviously looks better than what it looked like last year. But he also makes an interesting point about Cristobal, because obviously there are narratives about Miami's head coach that he's not going to be able to shake some of these narratives until he wins something at Miami, whether that something is an ACC championship or a national championship. He's not going to shake the narratives until he wins something down here. But Steele brings up some interesting points because, people love the narrative that Mario Cristobal can only recruit, but he cannot actually coach. And I see a lot of people saying, well, this guy's never going to win anything because he cannot coach. You see that narrative out there, but the facts are he won 2 Pac-12 championships, 2 Pac-12 titles. That's not nothing. He had the Oregon Ducks rolling. So, and I'm not saying some of the criticism isn't warranted. Should have taken the knee. Of course, at times should have made better use of his timeouts. There are definitely things you can micromanage and criticize about Mario Cristobal as a game day coach. But when I see people saying this guy can never win the ACC or can never win a natty, 2 Pac-12 titles, and the Pac-12, by the way, the reason why they don't exist anymore is not because it was a bad conference. It was a conference with terrible leadership. They had some really good teams in the Pac-12. He won 2 titles there. That's not nothing. So, this narrative that the guy cannot coach and he cannot win anything, he has won before. And listen, obviously we would all love to win national championships again at Miami, but winning a couple of conference championships, those are nice steps in that direction. I would absolutely take that down here. And of course, if you're talking about competing for and, trying to win future national. Oh, by the way, people have been pointing this out. I have been saying on this episode, we are live, by the way. I have been saying on this episode that it's Friday when it's only Thursday. The long weekend got me. I'm taking a long weekend. I'm probably not going to be here tomorrow. So, I'm looking at the live comments now. Dude, it's Thursday. What are you talking about? You're right. It feels like Friday for me because I'm going to be out of town tomorrow. So it's Friday in my world, my friends. It's Friday in my world. It's Thursday, though, in real life. And I see Jake mentioning that, hey, if I'm taking a long weekend, that means somebody's committing over these next couple days, because whenever Donno leaves town, Miami always gets new verbal commits. But there's a big change of leadership at Miami. And no, I will not be the next university president. They are not calling me back. I have offered. I've sent my resume several times. They are not calling me back in Coral Gables. But Julio Frenk, Dr. Julio Frenk, who had been president at the university for the past 8 years, he has stepped away. He's becoming chancellor at UCLA. So UM CEO Joe Echeverria will serve as acting president. So he is in place right now. I wonder if he would actually be seriously considered to take over the role permanently. I'm sure we'll get more clarity on that throughout the summer. Joe Echeverria, who's acting president right now, he was previously CEO of UHealth and made the UHealth system incredibly profitable. After moving into the role of CEO at the university, he was instrumental, along with VP Rudy Fernandez. I don't leave out Rudy either. The two of them were instrumental in hiring Mario Cristobal and in spending more aggressively on athletics, right? In understanding sometimes you have to spend more to make more. Sometimes you have to spend more to be great. Joe Echeverria, who's in that president's office right now, he's a Miami alumnus. He is a rabid UM sports fan. So if he were to take over, the best interests of UM sports would always be considered, would never be neglected. So again, I don't know if Echeverria, if he would get tapped as the permanent successor to Julio Frenk. And I say that because Echeverria's background is in business. Typically, president or university chancellor jobs, which are essentially the same thing, just different name. Typically, those jobs go to people with backgrounds in academics. It's a very dogmatic field. So I don't know if they would, go against the grain and bring in a business guy, right? Now, if they do appoint a different president, I hope Joe's role as CEO would remain intact because he does important work there. As far as Dr. Julio Frenk, we wish him the best. His legacy in Miami will probably have a lot to do with the hospital system that he really built up. And that was a passion project for him. Julio Frenk is the former Minister of Health in Mexico. Now, Frenk, it's interesting. His legacy in athletics, I never got the sense that he took much personal interest in sports or really cared about sports, but he basically let his advisors like Echeverria and Fernandez, he let them do their thing, which worked out okay in some ways, right? So at least he didn't meddle in a bad way. He stayed pretty hands off. He allowed a lot of those budgets to go up, which is good. But I do have to wonder if the next permanent University of Miami president, whoever that is, I have to wonder if that's going to be someone who takes more of an active and personal interest in sports. This is a critical time right now, guys, in college athletics. If you haven't noticed, the landscape is changing a ton. We're entering the era of super conferences. The TV money has never been higher than it is right now. And soon, Miami and every other school in the Power Four is going to be forced to budget around $20 million per year for athlete revenue sharing. So admittedly, I live in a sports bubble, but I'm also not stupid. I know that in appointing the next president, academics, of course, will be considered probably above all else, as it should be. But even if athletics may not be the number one priority, it cannot be ignored because there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. And football specifically can be the biggest cash cow. It's a very important thing to consider, especially for a private university that doesn't have the benefit of using or misusing our tax dollars, right? Because that funding does not come from taxes. So a huge part of being a university president is being a great fundraiser. And athletics are always an important source of funds. Someone like Joe Echeverria understands that. He always knows that sometimes you have to spend more money to make money. So, yes, I hope the next permanent University of Miami president is not only someone who can guide UM's overall academics back into the top 40, because I want my diploma from the U to be as valuable as it's ever been, but I also want the next university president to be someone who is on the cutting edge of exploring new ways to maximize athletic prestige and, of course, athletic revenue, even if that means aggressively exploring alternatives to the ACC, if it comes to that, because Miami's leadership to this point, when the ACC is currently getting sued by the Florida State Board of Trustees, they're getting sued by Clemson. North Carolina is maybe thinking of doing something similar. Miami has so far stood with the ACC. They've had, much more of a passive approach. I wonder if a new university president, whoever that might be, might take a more aggressive approach. And, no, to all the comments, I don't think they're going to bring back Donna Shalala. I don't think that that's in the cards, but I do wonder who it could be. So I appreciate everyone for making Locked On Canes your first listen and first watch today, even though it's not Friday. It's my Friday. It's Thursday for the rest of you. But listen, if something does happen, if news does break, we will do an emergency Friday episode. So I appreciate everyone for coming in. Make sure you smash that like button before you get out of here. Smash that like button. Subscribe to Locked On Canes. If you're watching us live on YouTube, if you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.